especially to all the Bhavans schools and Principal Ajit, an old friend. I know this could be an inflection as a post-lunch session, but nevertheless I'll try to do my best. It also has to be a short session because you have to get on with your valedictory. I think I've met a few of you before, but I remember. Most of them, yeah. I'm surprised. Anyway, nice to meet you again then. This is a simple topic on the face, but actually difficult because we are dealing with life, which involves both formal and informal learning. I'll share these slides with you. Obviously, it's free source, so you can have the slides after we finish. Actually, I'm starting in the middle of what I wanted to say, but I'll get back. Why should we learn? That's the question. So I'm just giving an aggregate answer. And I'm making an assumption that all education involves learning. It's not a bad assumption. Okay. Or all learning should lead to education. That's also not a bad assumption. I'm not saying it's a great assumption, but definitely not a bad assumption. Why? Usually I start with what is called the 6S framework, which I'm not doing for lack of time. So let me start off here. Why should we learn? Or the purpose of education? Since I've already started with the assumption that learning in the equation, the education learning equation is one. So I'll start off. There are three reasons why we learn, or why we ought to learn, or why we shall learn. One, to be at peace with ourselves. This is the individual's role. So I'm looking at three things: the individual, the interpersonal, as well as the social or cultural things. So at the individual level, we learn and we get educated so that we can be at peace with ourselves and with the rest of the world, which is very important, because a truly educated person would be at peace with himself or herself and with the rest of the world. And I'm sure all of you understand that. I'm sure even in this room, most of us may not honestly say that we are at complete peace with ourselves. There are moments when we get disturbed very badly, our peace gets disturbed very badly, due to ourselves, due to others, and so on. So the hallmark of an educated person is the ability to be at peace with oneself, even under the most trying circumstances. And not only peace with oneself, but peace with the rest of the world also, which is an important criterion. And the second criterion is to keep our and others' grace, dignity, and honor intact, which is very, very important. Because unless one is at peace with oneself, it's difficult to keep one's grace, dignity, and honor intact. And I know the number of times I have violated that in my life, and I know to that extent I am not educated. The number of times I yell at my wife, the number of times I yell at my children, the number of times I yell at my students are all indicators of the distortion in my education, if you want to put it that way. Whether it was formal or informal is another picture. Okay. And the third reason is, which is the spiritual reason, which is rooted in our land. The purpose of learning and education is to seek, struggle, and find fulfillment in our lives, both short-term and long-term, both through our work and living experiences. So work and living experiences. Okay. So those are the three reasons: to be at peace, to keep your grace, dignity, and honor, to seek, struggle, and find fulfillment. That's what education is supposed to do, and that's why we learn. And obviously the learner is vital, because you cannot have education without the learner. You actually can have education without the teacher. It's possible. The self-learning is possible. We have had a standing example in our mythology, Ekalavya. And our channel is also called Ekalavya channel. So the teacher was not physically present, but spiritually present. So it's all right. The concept of a guru cannot be taken away completely. But the learner is absolutely vital. You cannot have learning or education without the learner. But what's very interesting is, so teachers, programs, pedagogy, and infrastructure are essential, and governance and administration are desirable. This is how I would put it. Okay. In short, I've served as a head of the department in my department for 2 terms, and I can tell you, I discovered how dispensable I am, or I was at that time. So anyway, let's get on with it. Why do we talk of formal and informal learning? As has been stated very clearly in the opening remarks, formal learning is structured. You've got a curriculum, you've got a program, you're delivering it in a particular way, you do the evaluations in a particular way, and then the process goes on. So you say it's formal learning. and you end up with a sheet of paper which is a certification at the end of the study, and after the student provides us with sufficient evidence of academic competence, we give the certification, whatever the level of the certification is. There's another dimension to education, which is character. So all education is supposed to lead to competence on the one hand and character on the other hand. And character in simple terms is the knowledge and skills, that the competence that an individual uses to decide on when, where, how, under what circumstances to use competence. That is character. Okay. So that decision demonstrates character of a person. So the competence and skills to use competence and skills in certain circumstances denotes character, actually. Of course, this is a big fault line in education. I think many authors in India and across the world have written volumes and volumes on the depth of character. But well, we tag along, we go along, because we are still struggling to find fulfillment. So that is where we are. At a high level, both are integrated into a whole. But we can identify specific components of each in any instance. Okay? So it seems now that competence is being given far higher importance than character in our education. It seems. Well, all of us hope that it is false, but sometimes reality can belie our hopes. So that is where we are caught. Now let's, we will keep it down for now. There are now, you can imagine a matrix, a 2x2 matrix, okay, 2 rows and 2 columns, a table with 2 rows and 2 columns, where we talk of the 4 components of learning, and on the columns, let me say, we are going to label them formal learning and informal learning, okay, and on the rows, we are going to learn them, we will label them as conceptual learning and experiential learning. That's not on the slides, so you can probably visualize what I'm telling you. It's a simple table with 2 columns headed as, the heading is formal learning and informal learning, and the rows are labeled as conceptual learning and experiential learning. Now you could have combinations of this. You could have conceptual informal learning, conceptual formal learning, experiential formal learning, experiential informal learning. Now what are these boxes? This is important, and we all know as educationists that one needs all the 4 combinations. Why? The point is, the learner cannot be put through a formal system all the 24 hours. Even in a public school, which is residential, it's simply not possible for the institution to put the learner through 24 hours of formal learning. So first is the impossibility of formal learning for all 24 hours. So there is informal learning happening. The beauty is, even when we sleep and dream, informal learning takes place. Psychologists acknowledge that learning does take place even when a person is sleeping, and sometimes even in deep sleep. We just don't know that there are deep recesses in our subconscious mind where a lot of this learning takes place, but we don't know how it surfaces, when it surfaces, etc. But I have a more fundamental point, which takes us back to Indian traditions, culture, I would even dare say spiritual literature, which is important. The point is, how much have we learnt about ourselves before we start learning about the rest of the world or the rest of the universe? This is a tragedy of modern Indian education. That's how I view it, at least, because we have slowly lost the mastery of the self to the mastery of the rest of the world. But what do you do? But that's the way the system runs, and that's the way the momentum has been built. It's very difficult for us to change gears and change tracks and get on with life. So we'll do what we are doing, probably a little better in whatever line. But I raise that question to you, because I raised that question, how much have you understood about yourself to start understanding about the rest of the universe? Okay? So this is a deep question. I don't have answers. I know I fear the answers, okay, as would most human beings do, because we all know the famous Chinese curse, may you be your child. It's a very difficult curse, because one person we can't live with is ourselves. So that is why this kind of thought comes into our mind. How much do you know of yourself? So keep that aside. Let's talk about the rest of the world now.